On the morning of June 12, 1962, a guard at Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary made his usual morning rounds. He stopped at a cell where 3 inmates were still in bed. They lay perfectly still, their heads resting entirely motionless on their pillows. He called out to them, but nobody answered. He walked closer, and that's when he saw it. The heads weren't real. They were carefully crafted from painted plaster, with actual human hair glued to the top. The cells were empty. This illusion provided the inmates a multi-hour head start. By the time the guards realized the beds were empty, the 3 men had been gone for half the night. Alcatraz was designed to be the end of the line. Sitting on a 22-acre island in the middle of San Francisco Bay, it was built specifically to house the most dangerous, escape-prone criminals in the country. This map shows exactly what the inmates were up against. 1.5 miles of open water stood between the cell block and the nearest shore. The currents are exceptionally strong, and the water temperature constantly hovers around 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Prison officials even rigged the showers to run only hot water. They did this on purpose, ensuring the inmates could never acclimate to cold water and entertain the idea of swimming. But 3 men decided to test those defenses. Frank Morris was a career criminal with an IQ of 133. He teamed up with brothers John and Clarence Anglin, 2 former Georgia sharecroppers who had graduated to bank robbery. All 3 men had documented histories of attempting to break out of other federal facilities. Morris combined his sharp intellect with the brothers' sheer determination to dismantle a system that everyone else considered completely secure. Every cell featured a 6 by 9-inch ventilation grill set into the back wall. Decades of exposure to the bay's salt air had deteriorated the surrounding concrete, making it softer and far more porous than standard construction. They chipped at the weakened walls using stolen dining hall spoons, and even fashioned an improvised drill out of a stolen vacuum cleaner motor. To keep the noise from alerting the guards, they worked exclusively at night. Morris was known on the block for playing his accordion in the evenings, and he used the music to mask the sounds of scraping and digging. During the day, they hid the growing holes behind fake grills. They built these out of papier-mâché, using old magazine pages soaked and shaped, then painted to match the actual cell wall exactly. After 6 months of careful excavation, they successfully broke through the back walls. This granted them direct access to an unmonitored utility corridor used for plumbing and electrical maintenance. This schematic illustrates how they planned to cross the bay. They collected over 50 raincoats, stitching and gluing them together to form a 6 by 14-foot rubber raft. They built a makeshift bellows, a concertina-style bag that compresses to pump air, so they could inflate it by mouth. On the night of June 11th, the dummy heads went into their beds, but a 4th conspirator, Alan West, got stuck. The cement he used to shore up his vent hole had hardened, making the gap too narrow. Morris and the Anglins had to leave him behind. The 3 men climbed up the utility corridor and squeezed out onto the cell house roof. From there, they shimmied 50 feet down exterior pipes, dropping to a steep embankment on the northeast shore where the prison searchlights couldn't track them. Sometime around 10 p.m., Morris and the Anglin brothers pushed their homemade raft into the dark water. They had outsmarted the guards and tunneled through the concrete, but their survival now depended entirely on what happened in the freezing, unpredictable currents of San Francisco Bay. The FBI spent 17 years investigating before closing the case in 1979, officially concluding the men had drowned. The US Marshals Service, however, kept the case open. Their mandate is to pursue active fugitives, and they extended their search until 2026. In the days following the escape, investigators found fragments of the rubber raft and a waterproof bag full of the Anglin's family photos washed up near Angel Island. These items were found along the exact route the men had planned to take to the mainland, suggesting they were actively steering the raft rather than drifting aimlessly. Then, in 2013, the San Francisco police received a letter with no return address. The offer claimed to be an 83-year-old John Anglin, writing, "Yes, we all made it that night, but barely." For years after the escape, the Anglin brothers' mother reported receiving anonymous roses on Mother's Day. Then, in 1975, a photograph surfaced from Brazil showing 2 men whom 4 out of 5 facial recognition companies later identified as John Anglin. None of this is definitive proof, but because no bodies were ever recovered, the FBI's official conclusion of drowning remains at odds with the US Marshals' decision to keep the case open.
This is a hydraulic computer model created by Dutch scientists in 2014. By plugging in the tide data and water temperature from June 11, 1962, they mapped out exactly where the bay's currents would have taken a raft. The data revealed a very tight window. If the men pushed off between 11 p.m. and midnight, the shifting tide would have guided them straight toward the Marin County shoreline, delivering them safely to the mainland. But if they got into the water even an hour earlier, the outbound current would have grabbed the raft. It would have pulled them violently out through the Golden Gate and directly into the open Pacific Ocean. Alcatraz closed its doors on March 21, 1963, less than a year after the breakout. Its terrifying reputation as an inescapable fortress had been permanently dismantled by 3 men armed with spoons and raincoats. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers spent 6 months outsmarting the most secure prison in America. We know exactly how they beat the walls. But it's the sheer, unanswerable silence of the water that keeps us wondering if they ever made it to the other side.